Good afternoon or good morning, depending on where you're coming from. Welcome to Generations United's webinar, Designing Intergenerational Environments to Promote a Sense of Well-Being. This is our first webinar in our new series, sponsored by a grant from MetLife Foundation. We'll be hosting one webinar a month over the next 6 months. We take a break during the summer and then start back up in the fall. A couple of quick housekeeping items. The first is some text here for people who might have trouble hearing, who can't hear me or might just having difficulty hearing me. But you can look, there's two options to hear this, two mic and speakers and the other through the telephone. So if you're on one and it's not working, you may want to look to try the other. And there's an audio button on the feature of the webinar where you can control that. There also will be a time for your questions at the end of the presentation, so you can either save your questions until then or use the question function to ask them at any time. The questions will come directly to me, and I will be sure to ask them on your behalf to our presenters at the appropriate time. We are recording the webinar. The recording will be available early next week on our website, and later in this webinar I'll actually walk you through our website and where you can find that information, as well as the PowerPoint is currently available, as well as other webinar materials. And then finally, please just take 1 or 2 minutes to complete a short survey that you'll receive when you leave the webinar. It's more questions that would really help us in planning future webinars, and we really do rely on your feedback on what we do. So I'm thrilled today that we can offer a webinar based on an insightful presentation that was delivered at Generations United conference this summer. I've been fortunate to work with Liz, Matt, and Stephen for over 10 years now, and they've not only helped me and Generations United, but more importantly have really helped to lead and transform the intergenerational field. I'm going to give some abbreviated introductions of our speakers. They all have very nice websites at their universities that talk more about their experiences or publications. So Dr. Elizabeth Larkin is a professor of childhood education at the University of South Florida, Sarasota-Manatee, where she teaches courses in early childhood and elementary teacher preparation. Her research interests include the professional development of educators and intergenerational programs, policies, and practices. She was instrumental in developing the guidelines and standards for intergenerational practice and helped with the design of the Stride Right Intergenerational Center, which I think was the first corporate intergenerational daycare program in the U.S. Dr. Matt Kaplan is a professor of intergenerational programs and aging at Penn State University, where in addition to teaching and research, he provides statewide leadership for intergenerational program development and aging. He also works to develop and support programs that strengthen intergenerational relationships and competencies, children, youth, 4-Hers, and families across the lifespan. Matt has also created some phenomenal resources that are available on his website. Later in the presentation, I'll actually show you his website and where you can download those resources. Dr. Stephen Graves is our third presenter today. He's a professor of early childhood education, also at the University of South Florida, Sarasota-Manatee. His professional experiences range from teaching undergraduate and graduate students at a varied and impressive list of colleges and universities to teaching 3-year-olds and 5-year-olds in public school kindergarten. His research interests are in exemplary programs in early childhood education, teacher-family relationships, and autonomy in young children and older adults. Stephen's published articles in a wide variety of journals and presented papers throughout the U.S. and internationally. So while I'm turning the presentation over to Liz, Matt, and Stephen, I'm also going to start a poll question for you. And if you could just respond to that, see if I can get this launched here. There we go. If you can just respond to that about describing the space for your intergenerational program. Just take a second reply, and then that'll give our presenters a better understanding of your program. And I'm just going to go ahead while we have about 52% of folks have voted. I'm going to give it a couple more minutes, and then you can go ahead and start, Matt.
Okay.
Okay, all yours.
Okay, thanks a lot, Sherry. Hi, everybody. This is Liz, and I'm so glad you decided to join us this afternoon. And we are hoping that you will help us understand more about your spaces and how they were designed and how we can help you further at the end of this presentation. To begin, we thought we would ask you to consider certain elements in the environment's design that will serve the developmental needs of both younger participants and older participants and create a sense of well-being. For example, it's important that people have accessibility. That means accessibility to space and also accessibility to activities. Think about how there are age-diverse abilities among the participants in your program. So, what would be the height of the tables, and what would be the space in a doorway so that people can come and go without bumping into one another. Consider also that that participants in intergenerational programs in particular need opportunities for social interaction, but they also need opportunities to be private. In other words, to be separate from other age groups or other people for a while. And I know in early childhood settings sometimes that brings up questions of whether they can be supervised adequately if they have places where they can be private. And you also want to think about expectations for autonomy, or what we call independence, or and opportunities for connection. So what things are participants allowed to do or encouraged to do on their own, and what things are you putting in the environment that suggest people should be connecting with one another. And finally, we know that from brain research, it's really important for people to age well and for young children to develop well. They need to stimulate all 5 senses. And we want things in the environment that will not only stimulate the senses, but also stimulate curiosity so that there is engagement with the environment. Okay, and with that, I'm going to pass the next slide on to Matt.
Pretty much historically, with the intergenerational field, just to talk about human development, many people from the social sciences, especially with psychology, social work, and even education, I mean, we talk about factors, we look at well-being, we look at how individuals function and so on, and we don't really have as robust a history of looking at the environmental context. But when we do start looking at the physical environment, and it's increasingly in interdisciplinary literatures, we look at how important the environment is in terms of helping people get a sense of safety and sense of discovery and so on, aspects of human development that we're going to be talking about. And of course, when we look at how people interact with one another across generations, especially considerations of the physical environment play in very profound kinds of ways. So even though people who call themselves, identify with an intergenerational practitioner kind of label, are experts, you know, in issues related to the program development side of things, looking at the communication and so on, we're at the point where we have to reach out to understand what people in the design professions are talking about and figure out ways to find meeting grounds to learn about what they know about human environment behavior relations. Well, let me move on. I think we have to keep going kind of quickly with a bunch of slides. And here is like a classic environmental psychology kind of slide, conceptual framework. We're looking at where we are today. We're going to look at that, the nexus of environment, behavior, relations. So we're going to also talk about both sides of that nexus. So from the human development perspective, there's a robust literature about what it takes for someone to become a thriving, healthy individual, developing strong skills, sense of confidence, well-being, and so on. And then from the environmental side, there's tons written about creating environments that work for people. At any rate, so we're really looking to kind of bring some aspects of design theory together with some principles of human development, and that's sort of where we're beginning our talk today. Okay, Stephen?
Yes, hello everyone. We believe that developmental needs and assets can be thought of as a continuum. And we believe that it's very important as you're planning an environment for young children or older adults, or young children and older adults, that we consider these developmental needs and assets. We certainly recognize that there are individual differences in any group of young children as well as any group of older adults. What we've tried to do in this slide is general we've identified some areas developmentally that we think young children and older adults share. As has already been said, we believe there should be appropriate autonomy support kind of activities for young children as well as older adults. We know that young children are at the 18 months or so age are seeking that autonomy, and it's important to have activities available and engagement kinds of opportunities where these young children can be supported in their needs for autonomy. Physical exercise is important, of course, for both young children because they're learning so many things through their physical environment and through their senses and kinesthetically. And it's important for older adults as their world sometimes becomes a bit smaller to engage in physical exercise as well. Obviously, we need to provide opportunities for making experiences meaningful for both young children as well as older adults. And Liz mentioned the sense of it's so important for both groups. Learning how to express feelings is very important in a young child's development, and being able to express empathy and caring is also essential in older adults. We know from all the literature and research that young children learn primarily in the early childhood years through play, and we also know that older adults learn through social engagement and play. So there are mutual benefits in these. As young children are building their repertoire of social and cultural knowledge, the older adult is sharing those stories and handing down those cultural values to the younger generation. So as we try to provide welcoming environments that offer engagement opportunities, we think it's important to look at these development needs. Back to Matt.
Okay, and another word about our perspective. When we talk about an intergenerational design or environmental design, we don't see it as a set of universals, like just designs that work across settings and contexts and so on. I mean, the question for us, well, our main premise is that we need to look at the design in the context of what is being, what the folks in that setting are trying to promote or accomplish in that setting. So we're actually kind of moving away from trying to seek universals in design, although there are some universals in design, like what's called universal design, designing for accessibility for all participants, including seats that people can reach, and you know, a sound system that accommodates all levels of hearing and so on. So universal design principles are important. but there's so much more that we have to look at the context. So this slide simply says we need to, I guess we like the word alignment. We think the challenge is to align the design with program variables, like what's being planned, what are the objectives, with the policies for the organizations and partners involved, and the underlying values as to what people would like to see take place in that particular setting. Okay, and and also to add to the complexity here, in many cases we're talking about designing settings or spaces or places for which there's an implied multiple use. So talking about different groups using these spaces at different times for different purposes. So it gets kind of complex when you try to pay attention to
results of our survey. It looks like 25% of our participants have multi-purpose uses in their spaces, and 60% have no designated space for the intergenerational interactions.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. So hopefully by the end of our hour, we'll try to we'll work on that 60%.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's move on. Yeah. So we figured one good technique to convey what we believe in is to show some slides of the opposite. So we could talk about characteristics of an environment that are actually pose obstacles for the kind of interaction and connection that we as intergenerational practitioners look for. So here's an outdoor space which is right outside a living room type space in a retirement community that also has an early childhood education center in the ground. So it's a shared site or age-integrated facility. And here's an outdoor space right outside this window. It's a huge window, lots of light, gets good scores for many things. However, as design, our question for you is how is this space supporting quality social interaction? So what would you change? And by the way, I should thank Dyke Turner for many of these photos. He's an architect working in Washington State who has a long history of intergenerational design involvement. So I guess we're too large a group to have everybody chime in into the discussion. But so some of the themes that came out when we spoke at our conference, Generations United Conference, was based on what do you do in this environment if you're a user? I mean, obviously the janitorial staff had a lot of power here. Very easy to clean. Also risk management. I mean, it's very clear you can't seem to get a lot of acceleration going to hurt yourself because there's that separation. So it's kind of a bizarre environment. Doesn't seem to afford many opportunities for interaction and varied types of play, active and passive. All right, I'm going to move on. So Liz, Stephen, feel free to dive in if you have anything to add.
I just would point out that if you can see through the doors there that there are some pieces of furniture where clearly the older adults can sit and watch. So it does allow them to observe, and that might be engagement for them. But it doesn't, unless the doors are open, there's no invitation for the children to interact with the older adults. Right,
okay. All right, here's another image. Here's like a small playground space. Yeah, so people tend to feel that this particular space is sort of together but not together at all. Even the seating area is away from some of the play area for the kids, and the terrain doesn't really enable people to easily go in and out of the space. It's fenced off, so it really is not conducive to social interaction as we see it.
I think the participants in our session also mentioned the fact that there's this lovely natural environment surrounding the playground, but the fence cuts the participants off from the trees and the grass and the plants.
Right, right. Yeah, I forgot about it because I forgot about the natural environment because it's fenced off, so my brain kind of discounted it. A lot of subtle messages in this environment. All right, and then we look at public space, the domain of public space, and you know, out of current concerns about security zones and safety and so on, we see a lot of space being not accessible for public domain use. So you can just imagine how hard it is to talk about intergenerational engagement in an environment that's fenced off.
Okay, so we are interested in environments that will engage the participants intellectually so that there's cognitive challenge. And one way to do that is to provide an enriched environment where people can explore. And they do this very well in Reggio Emilia in Italy in the early childhood environments. And they consider the environments there so important that they're actually teachers, just like the adults are. So they set up the environment to permit students or children to pursue interests and explore and learn through interactions with the environment itself. So the whole point here is that you want to create an environment that enables the participants to be creative, to be inventive, to express themselves, and to work together with other people and interact around that environment, so it will create cognitive interest and cognitive challenge. Okay, and then in the next slide, I brought this up because this is a floor here at the university where Stephen and I are working, and it was funded by a local artist in a community arts project. And it's a terrazzo floor with bronze sea forms in it. And even though this is not in an intergenerational space specifically, I think it's an interesting idea because it involves cognitive interest for people in wheelchairs, or for people walking by, or for young children who are probably trying to amuse themselves while the adults are talking. And this same artist actually did the floors in the Miami airport. If you ever get a chance to walk through there, you'll see that they're fun, they're interesting, they're engaging.
Okay, here's another image. I believe it's Mount St. Helen. I forget the name of this facility, but it's the one that Dyke Turner works at in Seattle area. So the principle here that I think this design kind of really articulates nicely is the idea of creating little transition spaces. So it's not just a matter of thinking of the large activity spaces, but transition spaces either in the entryway or some nooks and crannies in the facility beyond that, which give people an opportunity to relate in different kinds of ways than a singular activity way. So for instance, this particular little seating area would be great for a small group talk or one-to-one talking, even as a larger activity may be happening in the major room right behind that space. And then the funny thing about this shot is that those glass doors on the left side, some people were saying that they saw an obstacle for certain kinds of usage and accessibility, in terms of accessibility, in that it's kind of a narrow walkway. It may be difficult for people that have mobility challenges.
During our session at the GU conference, some of the participants were talking about the Snoslin multisensory environments. These were developed for special needs. And Matt has often made the point that we need to work in an interdisciplinary way when we're doing intergenerational program design and environmental design, because a lot of things have been discovered or marketed in circles outside of our immediate interests. If you look at the multisensory environments that were therapeutic therapeutically designed for people who have specific disabilities or who need certain kinds of stimulation. I think there's some lessons there and some of the materials that they've used that could be adapted to any program. And they very carefully target visual systems, auditory, olfactory, gustatory systems, and as well as, what's the other one? Yeah, visual. Yeah, sorry, I missed visual. When we were planning the Strive Right environment, we ended up putting the child care wing on one end and the elder care wing on the other. And in the middle, where the entryway was, we had the faculty and staff offices so that they were close to each other and could interact and plan and talk, and also a common dining room and an art room. And the dining room gave us some delightful smells when we walked in. I think a lot of times when you go into elder care facilities, the smells are not so enticing. So that was a really nice design. And then the art room was nice because that permitted the two generations to come together and to create artwork without having any kind of competitive, outcome-focused experience, but rather a relaxed social environment where they could create in a process, an arts process that didn't have any pressure involved in it. And that was a very successful design that I think is echoed here in this Snowsland environment.
Okay. Oh, and Liz, a lot of these items are really transportable, and you could put them away. I mean, they would work really nicely for a multi-use kind of setting, right?
I think so, yeah. I don't know what they would cost, mind you, but you can go to their website and see what kinds of things they have created, and probably they would give a lot of background information, and those things could be adapted in any setting.
Okay. Oops. Oh, sorry. So here's a shot. It was some newspaper articles from Finland talking about active living, and they were studying the role of play, this kind of play, on the health of older adults, and generally people are pretty positive about active living concepts. Now, I think from an intergenerational perspective, you know, we want to ask the question: are we talking about active living just for older adults, or is perhaps play a universal enough aspect of human enterprise to be a nice way to bring people together to share life experience, stories, and fun times? So, so it's really, you know, there's a lot written about age-friendly environments and youth-friendly environments, but I think we want to have a critical intergenerational lens to that and ask questions about, well, you know, are we missing opportunities for creating age-integrated spaces where people can get to know one another, care for one another in different ways? And even if it is like what people may call a multi-generational environment, in other words, people can all go there, is it designed in a way where people can go there and interact and engage each other in positive ways, like play together? You know, so those are questions I think that are worth asking for us in many micro and macro environments.
We know that young children learn from real experiences, authentic experiences. So we certainly advocate exposing children to walkers, wheelchairs, canes, hearing aids, or other physical aids that some older adults may bring with them. We also know that young children are very open and accepting and say what's on their mind. I had a kindergartner tell me just this morning that I smell like bubble gum. I wasn't sure if that was my mouthwash or aftershave lotion, but anyway, I smell like bubble gum. But for young children, when they're introduced to these aids, it helps them know and understand that it's something that helps the older adult. And very often an explanation is brief as well, her legs don't work as well as yours do, is an explanation that's sufficient for a young child. Back to Liz.
Okay, well, we got quite a lot of pushback from the participants in our session at PU, so this, I still venture into the color issue. I think color is an important part of environmental design, and I think color can be used to stimulate interest. I think it can also be used to set a certain tone that is calming rather than aggravating. And I think that it also sends messages. And what's interesting to me about this color thing is that we have color associations that are formed when we're very young, and those associations last over a lifetime. And Stephen and I were laughing about how we both respond to that certain color of an elementary school green. It's Selenon green. It's a color that we associate with life in elementary schools when we were kids, and also I think hospitals use it a lot. So the association is kind of unpleasant for us. It's a mild unpleasantness, but nevertheless, it doesn't feel welcoming. It doesn't feel warm. It doesn't feel inviting to us, and we wouldn't want to be in an environment that was painted solely that color. So you can use color to set off a particular area or to telegraph the notion that this is a quiet area. I think color variety is important in that way. So you can do some more research on the cultural connections to color, because I think they are rather specific to certain parts of the world. What red means or what blue means can be interpreted differently. So those are things to consider when you're setting up your environment. What colors are you going to use for the walls, for the furniture, and so on.
In addition to this Daggett and others reference, I would recommend taking a look at Susan Kovalik, that's K-O-V-A-L-I-K, who's written quite a bit about environments for children in school. So you might want to check that out as well.
Okay, back to Matt.
Okay. Oh, and then I guess speaking more generally about intergenerational environmental design, we could look at what kind of messages or cues certain design elements convey in terms of who belongs in this space and how those people should relate to one another, if at all. So here's a mural that was at the entranceway to a facility I saw in Japan, in Tokyo, and it was like a multi-age community center, like services for the youth, for older adults, and some other people in the setting. But it's just really the words in Japanese, I forget the exact meaning, but it's something about like doing it together, being together, or unity together. So it's very powerful because it really does convey so much about what's expected in the place. So I think it's good to keep in mind as far as the messages that people get when they enter into any kind of setting. If you have a certain kind of activity that you're trying to convey, and a certain kind of meaning that you want people to associate with that place and why they're there. Okay, and then I guess when we speak about intergenerational design, we keep talking about opportunities for engagement, but the other side of that coin is also opportunities for disengagement, particularly, I guess, from an empowerment perspective, that people should have, and they really want and need opportunities to engage as much as they want, which also includes an opportunity to step away. It gets kind of ironic in certain ways when we talk about institutions where people have very little control, like in schools or long-term care facilities and so on, where people can't really choose when and where they get together and just get up and leave a space. In this particular environment, it's like a community room at a retirement community, and here are more like independent living, people from that independent living side of things and assisted care facilities things where they have enough control over the space and how they engage in it to be able to leave. And there are multiple routes to leaving. And even in long-term care facilities, there are ways to design escape opportunities.
I like this room because the chair in the very background provides an opportunity for somebody who might want some proximity to other people, but who might not be ready to really engage in a lot of social interaction as these folks are.
Okay. Okay, and then I guess in some work that I've done over the years, looking at bringing the generations together to explore the environments that they share. I mean, as neighbors, going on walking tours to share each other's stories and how they really live and what's important to them. Here we have a walking tour on the left side in downtown Honolulu, and this older woman on the right, she's basically telling the kids about where she lives and all about the activities in her assisted living facility. And the kids were thrilled to know what it's all about. A lot of the kids walk by there all the time, had no clue. So not only are they learning more about the environment, but they're learning about her. That then makes a lot of other relationship building good things more possible to happen. The one on the right is comes from this club. It's environmental, I guess, education group of older adults. I think they call themselves the 100-Year-Old Tree Club, and they've coded all the 100-plus-year-old trees in this area in Taiwan, and they invite groups of kids to come by, and they talk about the natural environment, aspects about growing the trees and so on, shape, but also local history, local heritage, myths, ghost stories. I mean, really making the trees come alive, and also at the same time grounding the kids in local history, and of course allowing them to get to know the older adults much better, as well as their environment. So there's a lot going on here, and the environment, the natural environment on the right is a real important aspect of the intergenerational relationship building goal that we have. Oh, and then we could talk about outdoor space design, and some of the greatest designs out there that people just love. Sometimes they don't even know why they love them. But here are just a few of the settings that people seem to have a lot of affection for. They work really well as areas of congregation. They're family friendly, and you see a lot of different kinds of activities happening in them, from the Spanish Steps Plaza in Rome on the bottom. Very popular area. Everybody seems to know this space, except for me. I forgot where it was from. And then we see Ross's Landing, the upper right, and you also have water and sensory play and so on. And water is also on the shot in the Netherlands in the upper left. It's a random shooting up of water kind of exhibit. So the kids get a little wet. There's a lot of discovery and fun and slight danger.
Yeah, Stephen and I were recently at Universal Studios and Epcot in Orlando, and they had a similar one as the one in the Netherlands, where the water would pop up at unexpected moments, and the kids and the adults on a very hot day were just delighted to run in and out of that, and it created a lot of interaction. Very exciting. Okay. Again, from the brain research point of view, we know that we need to stimulate our brains, use our minds in order to maintain a sense of well-being throughout the life course. If we don't use our brains, those things just simply shrivel up and die off. So we have got to keep our minds occupied and engaged with the environment and other people. I think social learning, social interaction has actually been shown to be one of the key factors in well-being later in life. And I just want to say one more time that even though we are creating intergenerational environments that foster that kind of social interaction, particularly among young people and older adults together. We also have to bear in mind that some people don't want to be physically engaged and interactive. They might want to have proximity, but they might want to have privacy, and we need to respect that. Okay, the other thing that is important to remember here is that learning and memory are connected to emotions. And again, I just want to say that positive social interactions and the environment, which is beautiful, comfortable, interesting, will be part of what brings up positive emotions. And those positive feelings are what will be maintained in memory for a long period of time. So if we want young kids to have positive attitudes towards older adults, we want to make sure that positive emotions are stimulated while they're in their presence.
And conversely, if a learner is feeling threatened, they tend to shut down. So that we also know that. It's some work by a couple whose last name is Penn.
That could consist of things like don't behave that way, or don't climb on that wall, it's not safe, or you should definitely try tasting this thing. I know you don't like it, but you have to try it, or you can't have any dessert. Those are the kinds of things that are threats, that shut people's emotions and stimulation down.
All right, and this slide basically builds on that, drawing from that research, the brain research about the importance of people relating in some way to the environment. We could look at objects that are psychologically meaningful to people, and use those as a bridge to have people communicate with one another. And the item itself can help people tell their story, and also could help the stories meet, and then they get more of a sense of some commonality and so on. Upper left is a memory chest. It's in a Netherlands neighborhood. I believe it's a retirement. It's a assisted living facility, as I remember. But they had many. They all liked the fact that kids came over to visit them and wanted to hear their stories about the community. So they put items into this memory chest that helped them tell their stories. The shot in the middle is from a 4-H club in Pennsylvania, and there's a miniature horse that a lot of the youth, miniature horses, a woman here has one, and she's using it to initiate conversation with an older adult who she wanted to visit, and as part of a community service project. So other clubs have, the smaller animals, some larger animals, but the animal is the connector in this case. And then there are games to play, like the Stump Your Relative game. You could have this in any exhibit or fair. Actually, you create like 2 bins. One is kind of objects that young people, teens and younger, tend to really know about, and the other one are items that older adults tend to know about, and then have them try to stump each other. And that was a game that we did at Ag Progress Days, and people kind of loved that. It's been hard to stay up with the young people's items for me over the years, so my kids have been really helpful on that. The bottom right, again, this is from the Netherlands. This is a top that this elderly gentleman from Turkey used to make when he was a kid, but it was part of a larger project organized and conducted by community development professionals, dealing with some of the tension around immigration issues and how they use open space. So they help, the idea of these toys, these tops, as a way to help people get to know one another, and then as a broader way to diffuse the tension is sort of the thinking here. I think in Dutch there's a saying, unknown equals unloved. So that fits into that context.
That's interesting. Okay, well, well-being and creativity go hand in hand. We think a lot about the need of young children to have paints and clay and sand and other things to create with, and I think we often forget about that being necessary and critical to well-being in older adults. But it's not just a question of stimulating senses. It's an opportunity for people to express feelings, to share cultural knowledge, to put a part of themselves out there. And they should be able to do those kinds of things freely without feeling that they're not producing at some kind of professional level. It should be just natural, spontaneous, and satisfying to the participants to engage in those kinds of creative activities, whether it's through performance or visual arts or even through musical activities. I think that an important notion is this theory of loose parts that Simon Nicholson put forward, and he was talking about it in the development of playgrounds for young children. I'm going to let Stephen talk about that part.
Well, part of the message here is for us to remember that if we're thinking about or planning an environment, we have to remember that there can be some not fixed or not static kinds of elements in the environment. We do have an opportunity to bring things in, as was mentioned with the snozzling materials, or as Liz said, with playgrounds, there are opportunities to bring paints and easels or dress-up clothes or other things for young children that are not typically part of what we think of as a playground for young children. But oftentimes, bringing those loose parts in provides opportunities for creative thinking and inventiveness and flexibility and fluidity of the space.
Yeah, and I want to just add that I think the idea behind the playgrounds is to create play opportunities that are not programmed and dictated by the equipment. So you don't want to have a car that can only be used as a car. You want things for climbing and jumping and moving and exploring that can be become whatever the imagination of the child or the participants wants.
And if I could just add, I mean, back to that concept of alignment, I mean, we're talking about a philosophy of working with people. So the staff would need to be trained in that kind of way if the goal is to have people use items in the environment to make up their own games and find themselves and so on. So you couldn't have overly rigid staff telling people what to do, when, where, and how. So it would have to go along, more participatory strategies for working with people would need to go along with this kind of concept for the environmental design to work. Okay, and speaking about participation, there, in terms of looking at environments, I mean, I've done a bunch of, I guess, civic engagement type projects where we gave multi-age groups different tasks. Large theme was what is your vision for the future? So we've done community mural days. We had Neighborhoods 2000 type projects. So we've used murals, we've used maps, we've used models, and so on. But the general theme is to have a mixed age group and have them talk about how they would like their community to be in the future. And you really get some wonderful discussion as far as what people's values are, you know, for living, and what are some of the issues that they really care about, including what they're afraid about, and including what they're hoping for the future. Okay, and here's a model. This one is from Kaneohe in Oahu, island of Oahu in Hawaii. The process is really key. We had a multi-age group as an after-school program, and it was talking about what would you do to design an open space, a park space in your community that would meet different people's needs across the age continuum. And at the beginning, the youth were really set on a skate park. Basically, they were upset that they didn't have one. Other neighborhoods had. So they just said, we want a skate park. And then, you know, an older adult tried to say, well, gee, why don't we, you know, talk? And then the kids started chanting, skate park, skate park. So it's almost like how some of these interest groups operate in the political arena these days. But somehow the kids realized that these older adult volunteers that were with them, they could actually help them get what they wanted. All they had to do was listen to what they wanted and develop like a negotiated plan for the park. So it's really kind of a cool process. It wasn't like youth civic engagement and older adult civic engagement. They're talking about age-friendly versus youth-friendly. They came up with the process was just civic engagement, and the goal was for them to talk about their respective needs and negotiate the development of a space that would meet all those needs. And it turned out it was very powerful when this multi-age group walked into the Department of Recreation's meeting in that district with this model and standing really strongly in terms of what they were recommending. Okay, so we're running low on time. Conclusion. So
yeah, we got 2 minutes. Okay, we'll zip to the conclusion. One of the things we want to reiterate is this need to think in a cross-disciplinary way, to look not only at architectural design, not only at intergenerational programming, but also different kinds of disciplines which might lend more information to our thinking. We've gotten some good examples of responsive environmental applications in different kinds of disciplines that can be applicable to the intergenerational usage. So look broadly is, I guess, the message there. And also think about different bodies of literature when you're doing a research in the library, looking at designs for people with special needs, not just for designs for people who are aging. Because some of the things, the adaptive devices that have been done for young children might even be helpful with older adults, and some of the stuff that's been done for older adults might be helpful with young kids. So we have to just keep on crossing those disciplinary boundaries as we pursue the opportunities and challenges. Matt, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you got it. I mean, the other basic conclusion is that we really do need to to have more collaboration with people in the design professions, and also people who are responsible for designing these environments need to understand, the human development and social relations sides of things. So it's a hard coming together, and I guess you do have some cases where people are developing wonderful designs, but they tend to be localized, and they don't tend to write what they're doing up in journals or whatever. So I kind of feel we really do need more opportunities for discussing what's been tried and what we've learned.
Right, and that brings us to our questionnaire, Sherry.
Yeah. Sherry, can we pass it back to you? And I see there's some great questions, so maybe you could lay them out to the group. Sherry, you still there?
I am here, yep.
Do you want to take control?
Yes, I can take control back to me. I'll just take control from you, Matt. There's no
Oh, okay, I didn't know you could do it without me pressing a button, but that's good to know. Very participatory.
Okay, so hopefully here's your questionnaire.
Okay, we thought that it might be helpful as a summary for you to think about these different elements we've been talking about, but also for us to collect some data about what people are thinking when they're designing intergenerational environmental spaces, and what kinds of things are still challenging for you, so that we can target our next paper or our next presentation that will really meet the needs of those of you who are out there wanting to know more about environmental design. So if you wouldn't mind, we would love it if you would think about the questions that we've got on this questionnaire and shoot me an email with some responses, and we will use your input as we plan our next steps.
And in 1 second, I will show everyone how to access this questionnaire. It is on our website right now. But I wanted to get to a couple of questions that came in, and just if you all would have a minute or two to respond to those. Specifically, one person asked about of furniture and some of the concerns around appropriate furniture for intergenerational interaction, as well as making sure that it's appropriate for the aging and the youth populations and some of those requirements. Can you speak to that?
Matt, can you speak to that?
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's an important issue. I forget his name. There was some designer. Is it Moore? I think he really was designing some really cool furniture, specifically, for intergenerational engagement. Like he was concerned that, like a wheelchair, for instance, a person in a wheelchair can't get too close to a child in a high chair while they're eating. So he designed like a table with a hole in it and legs inside that hole, so a child can actually be closer and more part of the family during mealtime. So that was super clever. And then you have people designing all kinds of environments that are multi-use, like playgrounds for all children, in Flushing Meadows and Queens. I presume that's still there. But yeah, I mean, I think the people who are going to be using the environment, they're the ones who are really have expertise, bring expertise with them as far as the needs, developmental needs and inclinations of those who use it. So there has to be a very close relationship with the designers. I mean, there's something called a charrette, which is like a participatory way for the designer to ask people what they need in words, and then he or she, as a design person, sketches out certain images of a design that may work, and then people will say, yes, that's it, or no, that's not it. So, I mean, there are ways to construct your own kinds of designs.
Yeah.
Well, one of our participants mentioned things like changing the size of the cushion in the chair, or there might be a variety of other small accommodations or modifications that could be made that we didn't really get into, but it's a good point.
Yeah, I remember at the Stride Right Center, they had a number of chairs that were called the Trip Trap chair. I don't know who made it or whether it's still around, because that was about 20 years ago, but it was neat because it looked like the letter Z, and the top shelf could be moved into a slot at any position along the middle bar to change the height of the seat. So depending on the needs of whoever was sitting there, you could have both older adults and young children at the same height at a table, depending on where you put the seat.
And another key factor, I mean, if we look at it from an empowerment point of view, there was like a seminal study done on long-term care facilities where they had people talk about, like, suggest what furniture they wanted. And actually what was more important than the furniture itself was whether people felt as though and actually did have some power in determining the decisions on what was bought.
I think
so it's not just, we can't just criticize the physical aspect of an environment. Like, let's say there's furniture, it's institutionalized color, plastic for easier cleaning, that's bad. We can't just say that's bad. We have to say, well, what role do people have in making these decisions about their environment, which has therapeutic value as well, as well as some of the relationship building properties that we're talking about.
Yeah, I think the participants being involved and having a voice is another way in which we stimulate intellectual interest as well as social interest, and it will help give the participants more opportunities to interact and have buy-in to the program's goals and values. So I think it's an essential part of the process.
And we need to get smart with universal design. There are tons of things written. I see one person wrote a lot about cushion depth issues, seat height, bariatrics concerns, and so on. So we really do need to understand the ergonomics of furniture development and make sure it's working for people of varied physical ability.
Mm-hmm.
So that was sort of the consensus of the questions, and the PowerPoint has the contact information for Liz, Matt, or Stephen. So we would encourage you that if there's additional questions, you can either come through Generations United. But I wanted to take just our last minute or two to walk through some resources that are available to you. The first that should be on your screen right now is Matt's Intergenerational Programs and Aging website at Penn State University. And here is where you're able to download is right here on the right part of the screen, a number of really wonderful resources on developing different intergenerational programs specifically. I wanted to also walk you through Generations United's website. Almost all of the resources that we develop and provide are for free on our website. And just to walk you through, under our work, the shared spaces, there's an option here for resources for shared sites. And here is where we put together our Under One Roof Guide, which is a toolkit on starting intergenerational shared site programs, which has a chapter written by Dyke Turner, who was mentioned in the presentation today, about the building process of building a program and some concepts around universal design. We also have a tried and true activities guide, which is available here, which was developed by Virginia Tech and Dr. Sam and Jarrett and their intergenerational program of a number of tested intergenerational activities, as well as some additional resources. To direct you to how to access the recording for this webinar, as well as the PowerPoint slides, if you go under Resources to Training, there's a section here on webinars, and if you go to the button here, click about the archive, it will take you to our webinar archive, and the PowerPoint for today's presentation is available here, as well as the questionnaire that Liz presented, and by Monday, the archive recording will also be available here. And then the last resource I wanted to direct you to is our publications list, which this is a comprehensive list of all of the publications that Generations United has put out over the past couple of years. But scrolling down to the P area, it's an alphabetical list. We do have a fact sheet brochure that we developed on Play called Play is Forever. And that's available, again, all of these are the free downloads on our website. Clicking here, of course, now that I'm actually clicking on it, would allow you to download those, as well as a whole variety of other resources. It will eventually come up. But just to go back to the home and tell you about a little bit of future webinars, we do have a webinar scheduled for December 8th. We're still working on the time because we have someone from the UK that's going to be giving it. So we're kind of negotiating with him an appropriate time for him. But it's about the Manchester A City for All Ages initiative that they've developed out there. So the webinars will all be listed on I hit the wrong button, I'm sorry, on our calendar, which is right here on the web screen. There's today's webinars and another event coming up. So the December webinar will be listed here. You can also sign up if you don't receive our e-alerts, right there on the right-hand button to get e-alerts. And we list all upcoming webinars or training opportunities, resources, and funding alerts there through that webinar. And then the last item I want to point out is you can also connect with Generations United through Facebook. YouTube is how we'll share all of the recordings of future webinars, as well as Twitter and our blog. And again, that is all on our website. And I just want to quickly close out, just so you know that this is, again, my contact information, as well as through me, you can get in touch with our other speakers, or or if any questions about future webinars topics, you can feel free to direct there. We're slightly over, but I want to again just thank Liz, Matt, and Stephen for sharing this very interesting and different topic that we've had before. We've already gotten some great feedback from some of the attendees, and I'll be sure to share that with our speakers. Please take the 1 or 2 minutes to finish just to complete the survey when you log out to give us some feedback on this webinar and future topics. And we also hope you take a couple minutes to look at the questionnaire, that the questions that our presenters have developed to help sort of get a better sense of what the design elements are around intergenerational spaces and intergenerational programs. So thank you all again. Thank you to the speakers. And we hope to see you guys here, or at least talk with you again in December for our next webinar.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
All right. Well,